I had a client when I was just starting out who didn't brief well. They told me to go 100% emotional for a script on a new commercial, which I did, giving them 3 options ranging in intensity. I sent those options to the client asking for feedback, brackets. They were just first drafts, but the client never replied. They just suddenly cancelled the rest of our booking. I was finally able to get in touch with them, and they said they couldn't use any of the scripts and expected me to get it perfect in the first draft without any feedback. That's how they usually worked, apparently, giving minimal briefs and expecting copywriters to get it right on the first draft without feedback or revisions. That, Glenn, is an example of a bad client.
Welcome to The Fix. Sit down with copywriting experts Nick O'Connor and Glenn Fisher as they review, discuss, and improve real-world copy sent in by you. This is The Fix.
That was a real life story that came in. I've been asking Fix Accelerator members on our Discord channel for their bad client horror stories. As you know, given that it's Halloween next week, my children are currently dressed up as ninjas as we speak. They're going to be scary ninjas on Halloween. I thought we could
turtle ninjas, not.
They're into that too, but we're saving that for Christmas.
Right, okay.
Given all that, I thought it would be nice to do an episode about bad clients. And specifically, I have 6 tips, 6 things I think you can do if you have a bad client to try and deal with them, which I think we'll come to in the second part of the show. But first, bad clients. Tell me your thoughts. What do you think of when you think of a bad client?
I think of bad clients. I think of this probably goes deep into my psyche that it makes me feel bad, and that's probably a more relevant thing than I realize, because I think bad clients, I'm naturally, and I think I'm not alone, I would guess that a lot of copywriters are in the same position, is when a client comes to you and they are making impossible demands, as your example there of perfect every time, or they're nitpicking, or they're changing stuff for the sake of it. And in that respect, I remember when I stopped being a bad client and became a better client, and when I'd be reviewing copy, I realized this moment. I went, all right, I wouldn't write it like that, but it's fine as it is. That's a moment of evolving in that thing. But anyway, back on the point, when I get bad feedback or what have you, or impossible feedback or bad briefs, I tend to put it on myself, and I think, I'm the problem there. I've made the mistake, but that's not the case. It's often it is in the client's realm. So I think we'll probably cover that as we go in to the thing. But yeah, I think bad clients, I just think it makes me think of people not listening. It all comes down to like people not listening, people not letting you do your job, and it will always be, without getting too Alan de Botton on it too soon, it will always be because they are ultimately insecure or don't know what they want, is my ultimate cheat sheet number one thing. They don't know what they want. So because they've probably got someone slapping them about, they're going to like pass that slap on to you. So if you can understand that, I think that unlocks bad clients.
I think that's true, actually. I would boil it down. I've been thinking about it a lot. I'm just going to say, actually, as a disclaimer, I'm not going to talk about any of my, all of the clients that I have at the moment. I'm very, very lucky. I don't really have any bad clients. I've had bad clients and I've heard plenty of horror stories. But just in case any of my people that I work for are watching and trying to work out, is that me? It's not. There's really 4 things that make up bad clientry. There's probably a few more that are real edge cases. Like, he drove round to my house and threw eggs at it. Okay, that's a psychopath. That's not a bad client. But there are 4 things that are pretty common. So I would say people who don't pay or don't pay promptly. That's the single most important one. because obviously that's our living. People who don't know what they want. So that's what you just said, who they've paid you to do something, but they do not know what the correct outcome would be at the beginning of the contract. So it's the equivalent of asking a builder to come around to your house and saying, "But yeah, build me something." And when they build you an extension, you think you say,
"Snake."
Yeah,
I would build me a brick snake.
Like, if they don't know what they want, they shouldn't be employing you. But plenty of people do that too. They kind of want you to tell them what they want and need, which is not the copywriter as well. It's actually a different job. People who cannot communicate properly. These are the people who go quiet on you, who ghost you in the parlance of it. They're really frustrating. That often is connected to the first two, often comes as a sequence. They go quiet, they don't pay you, and it turns out it's because they didn't know what they wanted to begin with. You get all three. And then the final one is people who can't review copy. I actually think that's a more technical thing. People aren't taught to review copy, so they're blundering their way through, and I'm slightly more, I've got more empathy for those people, because actually reviewing copy is in itself a skill. So I would categorize that differently, but the ultimate bad client is somebody who does all four of those things. And I think if you're watching or listening to this and you've had bad clients, you're probably now thinking, yeah, like client A that was a nightmare. That's because they never paid. Well, they didn't know what they wanted, or they went quiet for a month and I didn't know where I stood with them. And then they got back in touch as if nothing had happened. That's the poor communication. The review thing we'll come to, because there's actually a really simple way of dealing with people who can't review copy in a non-confrontational and constructive fashion. No, we'll do that at the end. Two words that will completely change your relationship with clients that can't provide feedback, but we'll do them right at the end, so don't let me forget, Glenn. Right. So I did have some more horror stories from the Discord. I feel like I want to read them. I'm going to read one more out just to see if it ticks any of those boxes. I'm not going to name names. Obviously, this is another writer in the Fix Accelerated Discord who said, "I had a really good meeting with a client and left with what I felt was a clear understanding of what they were after. They wanted a brand guide and some other stuff. Very clear brief. Make it clear who we are and why we do what we do, center stage." Both founders were very clear they did not want a services page just listing what they did. I wrote the narrative page, I delivered everything that they asked for, and the client response was they weren't sure how much of themselves they now wanted to include, and they wanted, wait for it, a services page to help figure things out. Complete 180-degree brief. Now, there are worse ones, but I feel like if I start going through them, people will guess who's being spoken about. So I'm not. But that's a classic example. So I didn't know. Again, why would you employ somebody? I mean, on a philosophical level, why would you employ somebody if you don't know what it is you want them to do? What those people actually need is a consultant type thing. I do a bit of consulting, where it's like, I'm not going to do any writing for you. I'll tell you what it is you need writing, and then you can go and brief another writer. But too often those things get mixed up.
I think we're roaming into the world of strategy as well. I'm going to reach out to Mark Pollard, who, if you've not come across him, he's a smart, clever man. But he kind of he's a strategist, and there's so many ties with copy and briefing and all that kind of stuff. But it's really interesting. I as you say, I think it is so much bad clientry, as we are adopting the thing, comes down from actually that they've not had they don't quite know what copywriters do. That's partly our fault as well, because I think the industry is a bit strange and a bit sloppy in how it defines what we do. But also they don't quite know what we do, but they've also probably introduced you to the process too late down the line. So I had a client recently who had done kind of all the strategy, had come up with like the line, this kind of strap line for the whole thing, and then they wanted me to write the copy around that, and I was like, oh God, like the original line doesn't make, like, I've got a lot to say about that, like that's gonna you've not thought of this together in the holistic thing. Now I can write around that, but I'm going to end up writing slightly worse copy because you brought me in too late for that kind of thing. So it's all tied up with strategy, understanding. I know we tend to get a bit like philosophical and like, oh, we've got this problem, we need to overcome it. Well, you need to go back to when you were born to deal with it. But it is that the more you can do that, the more you can get into that mode. I think that helps with bad clients.
So let's talk about practical steps. Okay, so it is always going to be super emotional dealing with bad clients, and in some of the coaching we do in the academy, it might not be about bad client situations specifically, but emotional situations as you're learning. You know, we'll provide guidance and, you know, talk to copywriters about that sort of stuff. And one of the points I was making to one academy member this week is it never goes away. You can be doing it for years. You can't change the fact that you're an emotional you're an emotional animal, and that you will feel emotional about things. Those things will change as your career changes, but people will piss you off. People will say things to you that will upset you or strike a nerve. And that won't change. It doesn't matter. It won't change. It might get a little bit, but you might get better at coping with it. So these are 6 practical steps, practical things you can do that don't rely on other people. Because the overarching reason that dealing with bad clients is hard is it makes you feel out of control. It's somebody else's behavior making you feel a certain way. You cannot change someone else's behavior. That's a good piece of advice for life. You can't change what other people think of you. You can't change the way other people behave. You can only change things that you are in control of. Glenn, you're now going to cite some sort of philosophical underpinning that I've reached. Presumably that's a philosopher that said that at some point. I've reached that conclusion myself.
Yeah, I mean, it's a generic philosophy trait.
Don't you dare call my philosophy on life generic. Right, point being, you can't control the way other people behave. You can try and nudge them, but it needs to all be through it needs to be grounded in the way you behave, actions you take. One overarching thing I would say is, if you are feeling emotional, do not engage with your client. Do not respond. Do not pick up the phone. It will not end well. That's another good piece of advice for life. If you're feeling angry, sad, upset, whatever, get away from the computer. It doesn't matter who you're dealing with, good client or bad. You will not generate a good outcome for you or your client if you are feeling emotional. So I always, if I get upset by something, or upset's probably the wrong word, I'm more a sort of seething anger person. I just think I can't reply to this. I can't engage with this until I've calmed down. That's probably going to be tomorrow or the day after. And I would rather create that small pocket of air, ghosting, I guess.
The kind of the catch with that, just because I can, like, I'm a like slightly embittered man who will hold it and wait and go, no, I'm waiting 10 minutes before I reply, but it's like, no, I'm hot. You have to go and do something different. You have to literally get out of that space, because if you just go away and go, I'm going to wait a little while, you could still come back to it angry. You need to get away and do something, preferably completely different, like not in the work world, that will then give you perspective and go, oh, actually, like that's not relevant to my life. Like that's...
Well, sleeping on it is the best piece of advice I can give you. In that moment, don't send that email. You have to try and come back to it when you think, I don't care. How are we going to deal with this so that you're rational? So that's the overarching thing. Emotion is your enemy, actually, in these situations. So within that, there's sort of 6 things that I think you need to do. And some of them are philosophical and some of them are very practical. The first one actually builds out of what I've already said. So you need to acknowledge that you own the relationship. It is your relationship with your client. It's something that you own, and you're the active party in that relationship. You have to see yourself as the active party, not the passive party. It is not incumbent on you to say, yes, sir, no, sir. What is it? 3 bags full, sir. Like, you're not just there to be dictated to. It's your relationship with your client. You own your business. You own your your client Rolodex, if you want to put it like that. So you need to see yourself as the active party. So if there's a problem, you have to devise a solution that will solve it somehow. You cannot just wait for it to get better. And they won't solve it for you, most likely. They're probably thinking about their business, their staff, their whatever's going on their side of the thing. If there's a problem, you have to identify it, communicate about it, devise a solution, whatever it might be. See yourself as the active party. Take control of the relationship. That's the first thing you need to do. That will make you feel better, because you're taking control of a situation, and taking control of a situation will always put you in a different mindset emotionally and rationally. So that's step one. Step two is to ask yourself, where is your red line with this client? What is the point at which you would walk away from the work? Okay. This is hard to hear. If you don't have a red line, that is to say, you are so desperate for the work that you cannot walk away and there is no solution, you have to accept that and accept everything that's going on, frankly. Because ultimately what you're saying is, no matter how badly you treat me, I'm not going anywhere. You don't have to communicate that to your client, but if there is no red line, and some people are in this situation where the work is so important to them financially or whatever, that you are in a weak position there. That doesn't mean to say you're a weak person, but you have to acknowledge the weakness of your position. That's a really tricky situation to be in. That's a slightly different problem. It's actually easier to acknowledge, well, I'm not going to walk away. Because if you're not going to walk away and there's no situation where you will walk away, sometimes you just have to try and sit back and think, well, I have to just let them do it then. I actually don't have another choice. Because all client management comes down ultimately to, I can end this relationship if I choose to. I can be in control of it. If you do not have that line, you've kind of got to roll with the punches a little bit, unfortunately.
I think
it's easy to accept.
You've got to put in brackets. So in brackets, in the YouTube world of this thing, it would be, this is like 10 ways to get new clients. Like, you've just got to accept that. That's the way it is. But in your spare time, you go, right, well, I accept that. I need to find better clients and do that stuff. So you need to go away and do that. It's being self-aware is ultimately what you're talking about, is, that I have to do that. Like, but also you can be more relaxed about it in a certain way, where it's like, well, that's the way it is. So it goes back to the first point of, you are in control of it still. It's just that the boundaries are not ideal. So you want to go and find some other clients where the boundaries are more ideal.
Yeah, and if just acknowledging where that red line is can help you actually understand, how annoyed do I need to be about this? So somebody asks you to make some design changes that aren't really part of your remit. I've been asked to do that. It's annoying. Am I going to quit over that? No. It's a good client. I like working with them. I get on well with them. It's great ideas. They pay promptly on time, all those things. Okay, just suck it up and get on with it. That's what my wife would say to me. If I'm moaning about it, she'd say, what are you going to do? Are you going to not work for them anymore? No. Well, stop moaning then. There are some small things you can do, but on one level, you're not going to walk away. So let it go. You're not prepared to take action, the ultimate action, to resolve that situation. So why are you letting it bother you so much? That's a philosophical way of putting things into perspective. So where's your red line? What will and won't you accept from someone? If you decided to accept it, just accept it and try to stop seeing it as a problem and just something that you have to deal with. Okay, those are the first two. The next one is a lot more practical. When you start working with a client, set out your processes and expectations clearly with them, both in person, on the phone, and in writing. That is to say, here's how I like to work. I like to submit a first draft it's a one page, it has a few ideas. I like to get a bit of feedback from you then. You pick which idea you might like. I then go away. I write this amount of copy. I send that back to you, however it might be. I would also in that process say, I usually invoice at this point. When you've said, I like that idea, go away and write it up. I'll invoice half my fee. Then I go away and write the full thing up. I then come back for a further round of feedback. However it might be, you need to lay those things out. Now, very occasionally a client will say, here's how we want to do it. That's fine too. You can then say yes or no. If you don't like the look of their process, say no, that's not for me. or propose an alternative. Most clients don't have a process. They actually want you to tell them how things are going to proceed. Lay it out very clearly so that there can be no doubt. They may well ignore it, but you were very clear about laying out your expectations and the process that you wanted to follow so that it's being done. Otherwise, it's all up in the air.
Yeah, I would just, and a little kind of sub point on that, you described it in the way you would lay out in your terms, Nick, and I just want to make sure anybody listening understands this as well. If you can, at that point in the description of that process, to preempt any potential bad clientry, work in some element of an opportunity to show a draft before you've gone too far. That's going to be different for what you're writing. If you're writing a big long copy sales letter, for example, I'm submitting a headline and lead by the end of the week, and then I'll go away once that's approved, so I know what thing. However, if you're looking at some website copy, maybe send a first draft and just like some ideas, like try and get some element where you have an early doors, a general principle agreement for where the copy will go. If you can work that in, you're going to be, again, they might turn around and ignore that and go back and say, well, the headline here or like this, and go, well, I at least said that, so it's you taking control of that. So you've got to get that, that in.
Most people will be happy to follow your process. It's about taking a position of authority. I'm the writer. Here's how I like to work. Would you like to work with me on these terms?
Yeah.
I'll bill you here. So for instance, one of the things I say is, I'll submit ideas, headlines and leads first. If you don't like any of them, don't pay me anything. I'll go away and write new ones and submit those. I'll go away and do nothing because we might decide not to work together. I say that to people. It's never happened. But I just want to let you know, you don't have to pay me anything if you don't like what I see. But if you like what you see and you choose it, at that point, you're buying that idea off me. So you'll pay me half. And then I'll go away and I'll write there. That's perfectly fair to all parties. So I'm sort of I'm trying to show them how it can work for both of us. It's not like I'll bill you up front and then you'll take what you're given, because why would they take that deal? So I'm trying to take control of the process in a way that's fair to all parties. The client isn't going to do that. Why? They're not thinking about that. They're just thinking about what they get at the end. So try and take control of the process. Lay out your expectations and your process. Do it in writing. Have the call and then send a follow-up note. Here are all the things we discussed. Here's how we're going to work together, just so we're clear. Take control. People respond to that because it's a position of authority, and therefore the terms of your relationship are set slightly differently.
Yeah, just on that as well. The only thing I'm thinking from personal thing, people get paranoid that you kind of maybe, oh, you're being pushy, you're doing this. What you're doing to a client, especially if you're a freelance copywriter, if you're like working outside of their business, what they're doing, they're really busy in an office where they've got all this pressure and all this thing and day to day, and there's urgent shit going on in the office and all this kind of stuff. What they want is someone they can trust and someone who's going to take all of the problems away from them in regards to that specific project. So if you're evidencing, I'm in control, I've got you, they want to hear that. They do. You might not read that between the lines in the emails, but I promise you, I've worked in all of the different variations of those situations as a manager in-house, as someone outside, as working for someone, as working as the boss of people. That is how it's working. If you sat on the outside, just go, I've got my stuff together, you can turn up on Friday and it will be there. That will be music to their ears. That's why you get repeat business. That's why people keep coming back to you. That's why they'll pay more for you than they would for someone else, because they know you are in control and can do it. So it is worth it. It just feels, I know for myself, because I'm a paranoid, anxious maniac, I'll be like, oh God, I'm bothering them. No, they will see it from a different angle, go, all right, they're in control. They know what they're doing. Cool. I'll leave it with them. So
exactly, like just one way of putting it would be to say, help them to be a good client. Don't let them be a bad client.
Yeah.
And that's what you just said. Am I bothering them? Don't worry about what they're thinking, or you can't change it. All you can change is the thing that you do and the way you do them. Okay, so lay out your process really clearly at the beginning. Include invoicing in that process. So that's really, really clear. Again, it's not contractual. I mean, I never really work on contracts beyond, GDPR or share dealing things, agreements. I don't lay out the terms in a contract usually, but I like to write it down because most people are good. And if you say, look, we said we would do this and you said that was okay, the odd person will say, well, I've changed my mind. Okay, you're showing me you're not just a bad client, you're a bad person. So I won't work with you anymore. So most people aren't that. Very, very few. Most people will, to use a sexist term, conduct themselves as gentlemen. If you make an agreement, they'll try and stick to it. So make that agreement. Okay, let's say something goes wrong in the course of the writing project. What do you do? Well, again, you have to take control. Call out the problem. We have a problem here. This has happened. You think this, I think this, whatever. Not like a disagreement. Here's the problem. Like, I wrote something for you. I now haven't heard back from 2 weeks. That's a bit of an issue because I put that time aside for you and now I haven't heard back. I've got other work coming up. I'm worried that the project's going to drift or that it won't be delivered on time. That's the problem. In quite diplomatic terms. Call that problem out and suggest several ways forward. The several is really important there. Choice architecture. Give your client the choice of how to proceed. This is a copywriting technique. Choice architecture is a powerful thing. They're the only thing more powerful than telling them you have the choice. So they feel in control because they get a choice, but you're the level above because you created the choices. You're like the architect in the Matrix. If you've seen the end of the second Matrix, and you meet the guy in the room where it's like, you all have free will, but I choose what you get to choose. So who's really in charge? It's a little bit like that. So call out the problem.
The answer is Colonel Sanders, isn't it?
It is Colonel Sanders.
Okay,
Slash. I think the guy's name is Robert Morse from the old dude in Mad Men. Roger Cooper. He looks a little bit like him, a sort of Colonel Sanders, Southern gent figure. Yeah. So say, look, we've got a problem. Here's what we could do. I could come up with a new idea. I could send you this. We could make a new agreement, whatever. I can finish writing what I've done. I could deliver it by next Friday. We get it back on track. Sometimes if I'm a bit unhappy, I'll give 3 options. The third of which is we can terminate our agreement today and stop working together if that would be better. Because sometimes that's the red line issue. Sometimes it's better to say, would you rather stop? Because I've got no desire in plowing through the rest of a project that's kind of dead on arrival. Maybe that third option is like, you pay me for the work I've already done and we part as friends. We're not. But like, I want to give you ways forward. It's my job to do that. The client won't do that for you. You have to do it. It is easier to do if, like Glenn said, you've been on both sides of the trade. You've been a publisher, you've been the client, because you kind of understand how it all works, and it's hard if you're getting started. But just be polite and lay out ways forward and say, what shall we do? Again, you're positioning yourself in a position of authority and you're giving the client choices. So let's go for, let's do that. You write me a new headline and lead and we'll go from there, whatever it might be. That you're trying to solve the problem for them. Again, you're giving them the choice. You're trying to help them be a good client rather than sitting back and letting them be a bad client. I think that's probably the secret to all these things.
Presumably, just to market those options that you're giving as well, you need to be comfortable with them. Don't write them options as, well, if we can do this, then at least we'll get there, because then you won't be happy. So it needs to be options where it's like, right, okay, I'll do this. It always reminds me of Bill Bonner's negotiation techniques of kind of, you go in knowing where you will take, and if they turn around and it's within your range, you have to take the lower price and all that kind of, you have to be aware that what you're suggesting is like, yeah, okay, if they say that one, you don't want it to be something where it's like, I hope they'd not say that one. They need to be happy to do and follow up on.
Well, that's done. Yeah, don't give them a door you don't want them to walk through. It could be as simple as, right, what I think we really need to do is get on a phone call and really talk to each other and agree which option should be best, because we've got option A or option B here. And creatively, we're kind of straddling the two. Let's get some clarity on what we want to do, and then we'll make a plan. But even just being the person that calls that meeting, you're positioning yourself within the relationship in a different way. It's fine if the client says we need to do a call. That means they're a good client. They're communicating properly. Like, you're going to have disagreements, and you're going to have situations where they like it and you don't, or vice versa. You can't do anything about that. But what you can control is the way in which the dynamics play out and who's in charge. So if they are a great client, they'll say, hey, I read the copy. I had some issues with it that I think we need to talk about. Great. It won't be an easy conversation, but at least I'll know what the issues are, and then we can make a plan. That plan might involve me or it might not, but I'll know where we are. If they don't do that, you need to be the person to do it. So suggest new ways forward, and don't complain. It's not your place to complain. You can describe the problem and offer several solutions, and through that process, you can make your position known, but don't say, I'm not happy with this. Hey, we have an issue. This isn't really working. We now don't have time to do X. How are we going to deal with that? Well, there are 3 different ways I think we could do it. Let me know your thoughts on them. Again, you're kind of getting the conversation into a shape that you want it to be in. So those are the first 4. The final 2 are quite simple, actually. The 5th one is invoice regularly. Do not find yourself in a situation where you have to do lots of work and only get paid right at the end, unless you have such a great relationship with the client. Even then, it's better. I have brilliant relationships with my clients, but I still do a 2-part. Something close to the start and something on completion, just because you never know if the scope will change. There could be changes in the business, changes in the market, changes to staffing or whatever. You never know what's going to happen. The person you work with might leave. So I like to break it down because that kind of ensures both parties. Often we kind of have a bad client section of the Discord, don't we? People talk about issues that they're having. And one of the things I always say is, if you're in one of these projects that's gone on and you don't know where you stand, the first thing you need to do is try and get paid for the work that you've done and reset the relationship. So it's like invoice and reset. Because at least then you can say, well, I've been paid for what I've done. Maybe I've lost something along the way in time. But it's not like, oh, they now owe me a lot of money and I've put 4 months of work and I haven't seen any payment in that time. Do not allow that situation to develop. If you're in that situation, you allowed that situation to develop. You needed to come up with a different billing structure to prevent it. So you want to invoice as regularly as you can without it becoming ridiculous. Like, I'm going to invoice you daily. Because there's nothing worse than having money outstanding, is there? Nothing worse.
I tend to do it so I invoice on the 1st of the month for almost all of my clients for the previous month. And therefore, if you've got a project that is still rumbling on, you can go, hang on a minute, why isn't this resolved, kind of thing? And it's that naturally, it shouldn't go to the next month. But again, you've just got to figure out, it depends how big the projects are, what your specific thing is. But yeah, it's just keeping tabs on it is key.
And again, communication and laying out the process is really important. If it's a massive project, that's great. It's probably going to be well paid. It's going to be creatively challenging, because the longer ones tend to be. You need to bring that up at the start. Okay, this is probably going to take me 4 months. I'm probably going to invoice you 4 times. Roughly speaking, this will be when it will happen. Get their agreement so that you can bill it. We have had people write to us where, God, I've been on this for 3 months. I'm owed a ton of money. Now they're changing the scope. Okay, that is a situation that happens. You have to get upstream of it, to use a terrible management term. A month in, you needed to be billing for that work that you'd done, or somewhere around that period, so that situation doesn't develop. Because if you've already done the work and they haven't paid you any money, you are open to bad clientry, aren't you? They've got you over a barrel, for want of a better phrase. So invoice regularly, communicate clearly around when you're going to invoice, and make sure you don't build up this sort of bad dynamic. It wants to be nice and equitable. Just as a client probably won't pay you up front for work you haven't done, obviously. Why would you? Unless they really know you. You don't want to end up having done all the work and not been paid anything yet for a longer job. You don't want either of those outcomes. And then the final piece of advice is walk away. If they are that bad that they're making your life miserable, they're doing all of the red flag things that we've been talking about, and you are in a position to do so, walk away. If you're finding yourself complaining about that same client over and over and over and over and over, you have to use the fact that you own the relationship and that you can exit that relationship. If you're a freelancer, you can break your agreement. You can say, I'm giving notice on the agreement or whatever it might be. Ultimately, you have to be prepared to do that. You can't just, beyond a certain point of suffering and complaining, you're kind of allowing it to happen. And that's hard to hear, but it's true. So yeah. Glenn, you're nodding your head at me as if to say like, will you get into this mode?
I'm closing my inbox. I'm never replying to another client. No, I think I was thinking about majority of cases is going to be freelance. What we're talking about here is when you're dealing with clients, it's kind of in the freelance world. So you're kind of self-employed. And so there is that thing where you've got that natural, but I need that money. But what I was thinking about is if you were in a paid job or in a often falsely secure job, if you were just getting picked on and bullied and ignored and all this kind of stuff, you'd think about leaving the job. You'd have to. It's all levels, and you have to be aware of that. But ultimately, yeah, if it's affecting you to that extent, even though you're freelance, you've still got to do something about it. You've still got to walk away. Or I guess but like the way to think about it is that the fundamental thing in life, I always remember, it equates to that kind of job interview thing. You need to go into that job interview thinking, I don't need this job. You will ultimately get the job. If you go into and think I'm casual, I don't need this job. It's a discussion, what have you. That I remember that from being like a 16-year-old kid trying to get a job for the first time. It's the same with a client. If you can walk away from that, then you will be in the position of power. How you get to that, you've just got to be constantly thinking, I need to be able to walk away. If you deep down also think, I kind of need the money for this, so I know I can't just walk away, you just need to be thinking, how do I get back to that position of power? And I think you go back to the start of these tips and you work through them. By the end, you shouldn't ever get to, I need to walk away. But if you're in control of it, as you've described there, then go, to borrow from Colonel Sanders' reference from earlier on, you shouldn't be in a position where you'll ever get to that point. But if you do, you've missed all of these.
You have to be prepared. And by the way, if you're walking away, just walk away. Just one thing that you should never do is threaten to walk away. It's like somebody threatens to quit. Either quit or don't quit. I don't care. Like
posting on social next week. No,
don't do any of that. It's not worth it. It's a business relationship. You've taken the emotion out of it. You're either going to do the job or you're not. Ultimatums, things like that never work. They're never a good idea unless you're a Premier League footballer or whatever, and it's like a negotiating tactic. It's a job. So if you're not happy in it, or you're not happy with that client, you need to go look for other clients. Once you've secured those, you can walk away. If it's that bad, do that. Just know that you can. Know that you can. So those are 6 things you can do. The bonus thing, like I said, I'd talk about at the end of the show, was if you have a client who is bad at giving feedback, 2 words. 2 words will solve everything. Those words are what if. Ask your client to phrase every piece of feedback they gave to you, starting with the words what if. So this is a technique that we were taught when we were at Agora, which was for reviewing copy. So we would all score the copy based on how strong it was, which was not that useful in my opinion. What was really useful was that you would then look at the copy and everybody had to say, what if we did X? So this actually works. You could do this if you were getting feedback on a business plan or a pitch deck or anything, because it forces the person to be constructive. What if we didn't start with this line, we started with this line? Okay, now we can vote on the relative strengths or weaknesses of that change. What doesn't work is when someone says, like, I've known people in quite high positions to say, I want the copy to be more compelling. I don't know what that means. That's like saying you want it to be better. Well, we all want it to be better. What you need to do if you're providing feedback is say, what if we changed the tone so that it was less friendly and much more formal like this. Okay, we can vote on the relative strengths and weaknesses of that. Again, you've got a client that's struggling to give you feedback. Say, could we try this? Let's just keep going for what ifs. Make suggestions in that format, in that sentence structure. It will shock you how quickly the discussion becomes about suggestions, constructions, things that could be changed, which are separate to you and them, and you can both look at and say, well, that actually does make it stronger. I like that. Let's put that in. People who are good at giving feedback. There's a guy I work with in the States who is the publisher of one of the divisions over there. It's like he's just said, I'm never going to give feedback unless I start with the sentence. Unless I start the sentence with what if. Everything is what if. What if it was impact fund? What if it was this? What if we did this? What if? And it's just like, okay, this is just a list of things I can try. It's brilliant. So ask your client to feedback like that. What if?
Good advice.
2 words, check your life.
Yeah, just anticipating that, I'm thinking of because obviously, Nick, most of your clients are in the kind of agora world, so have a basic understanding of that theory. I'm thinking of going to an agency, going, oh, please could you respond saying, what if it wasn't? Most of agency feedback is usually reductive and what if it was more like everybody else's copy kind of thing. But you can still try it. You can still say, what if? I would probably just caveat that if you're going into that world, if you feel brave, in control, go for it. Just say, can you phrase this as what if? But maybe the first precursor to that might be just taking control of that yourself, and their feedback will be ambling, not quite knowing what they want. Then you could, well, what if it looked like this? What if it did this? Show them you using that technique of saying, well, what if it did this? I will always go, here's the options. What if we tried this? What if you did this? Or what if you stuck to your idea, which I think is this, which is rubbish, but allow them to see the potential of that what if thought process. It's just a little way of getting people into that. Once you get into that world, you are home and dry. It's a much better way. It works for the client. It works for you to go, oh, actually, we are all here. And I always remember this for all feedback. We're here to make the copy stronger. No one's trying to make it crap. Even the feedback I got on some copy the other day, it was ridiculous. It was just nonsense. But they're not trying to make it rubbish because it's just that they don't know, and they've read everything on LinkedIn and they've had very boring people telling them that this is how it thing and not to try anything different. They're not trying to make it worse. They're trying to make it right in their perception. They just don't know what right looks like yet. So it's all about making stuff stronger. Once you get into that mindset, it's going to help you with clients. And I would say probably one thing I was going to say at the beginning, Nick, but it kind of seems like a good conclusion. Bad clients, there isn't often just a bad client. It's not an evil, it's not like a psychopath client going around trying to be how can I find these copywriters that I can exploit? Don't get me wrong, there probably are those people in the world, but you're acting as I'm trying to think of the best way to describe it. You're not a bad person. You're acting in a bad way. You're behaving like a bad client would. What you're trying to do is go, oh, actually, you can behave like this and it will be better. It's not that person's out to get you. It's just that they, for some reason, don't understand what they want and are acting in bad faith. At that point, you're just trying to steer them towards being the best client they can be.
Exactly. You are steering them. You are in control. You're doing what you can to help them be a good client. And I think that's the underlying thing, that, they're not evil. They're not very few people are trying to annoy you. They try to do their best. They may be behaving in a way that isn't optimal. Try to put things around them by communication, processes, choices, whatever. that allow them to be the good client they sort of want to be, because nobody wants to be that person that's known as a bad client. Anyway, I think we should sign off with a request for people to write in with their own bad client horror stories. So feedback at thefixcopywriting.com is how you can get in touch with us. We won't publish names. We will anonymize them if we have to or whatever. But it's always fun to hear about some of the things that people think are acceptable. That can be our sort of our early Halloween treat, hearing people's client horror stories. But for now, Glenn, I reckon we should sign off and see everybody next week.
Yes. And speak with gaps to suggest the end of the episode. Goodbye, everyone.
Bye-bye.
If you enjoy The Fix and want to get access to even more good stuff, join the Fix Accelerator today. Get access to special masterclasses from Nick and me, watch expert interviews with industry legends, join live copy feedback sessions every week, and get connected to our very own private copy network. Visit thefixaccelerator.com for more information.